Hi, and welcome to A Drummer's Guide 2, the podcast all about the things that it takes to be a professional musician aside from actually playing your instrument. So, today I would like to talk on something that actually was inspired by a lovely listener, Louis Morehouse. Hey Louis, how you doing? If you're listening to me on your Saturday morning, as I know that you often do, and also you are always the person that pulls me up when I haven't released an episode every week, which I did 2 weeks ago, and instantly I was like, Louis gonna be on my back about this. But anyway, I just wanted to basically, Louis put a comment on my last episode, which was talking about how I got my sort of quote unquote big gigs, or named gigs, however you want to put that. Gigs where people know the artist when they say, so who have you been playing with recently? And you say, and they go, oh, I actually know who that is. So I kind of did a rundown of how I got each of those gigs just to have it in one place so that other people can look at that and go, oh, I see a pattern there. I know how I would probably do that to try and like increase my chances of getting on a named gig or whatever. But his comment was so fascinating to me because I was like, oh my God, you're so right. This is probably even more valuable, at least to me it is, which is he said to me, what about all the stuff that you were doing in between those big gigs? And I was just like, how did I not even think of doing that? So, Louis, first of all, thank you. You're a legend for many reasons, which you know, I think. But yes, I thought that it would be really beneficial just to share all the other stuff that was going on, because before I got on a named gig, if you like, which for me was The Hours, that was back in 2008, I had this misconception, definitely, that once you're on a named gig, a big gig, once you're working, that is all you're doing. That is the one sole thing. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes that is the case. In fact, funnily enough, so when I was sort of like struggling to get on my first sort of proper professional gig, my best friend Charisse, so she had been in a band called The Faders, which had become her full-time job, essentially. She was on a retainer with them, so that's what I saw. She was literally just doing that. She left school for it, like the whole shebang. And I was like, oh, so that's what happens. And then she moved on to another gig, which was Mika, which, similar thing, because at the time he was... I cannot state how massive he was worldwide, and therefore the amount of work that they had, the amount of touring that they had, that was her full-time job. She had no time for anything else. So I grew up seeing that, and I was like, oh, so once you're on a gig, that's it. That's all-encompassing. You don't, this is how I thought, you don't need to do any other work. You can just do the one thing and that will be enough. Boy, oh boy, how I was wrong. So very wrong. And I learnt very quickly, very, very quickly, that actually, and the more that time has gone on, the more that this is true, unless you're on like a huge worldwide known artist, it is very, very unlikely that you will be able to, and unless you're like living with the lowest overheads possible, it's very unlikely that you can retain one gig and survive, basically, because that's what it was always about for me. It was about survival. Like, I've never been the person that is like, I want to be, a millionaire. No. All I've ever wanted is to make a living from music and cover my expenses. That's since literally day one, pretty much. Well, maybe not day one, but probably like when I started to realise how tough it is and the reality of it, I was like, okay, I just want to be able to cover my rent, have food in the fridge, have a roof over my head, and that is success to me. And that, that was true from, I don't know, when I was maybe 14, 15, something like that. And I was like, yeah, like to me, that is winning at life and sort of getting away with it, as it were. And honestly, I to a degree, I still live my life like that. Like, everything is just surviving another month. And I'm like, cool, okay, great. In fairness, it's a little further ahead now, but it's that same mentality of like, I just need to do enough that I can carry on doing this, because I just love my job so much. Like, and for me, it's the different aspects that come with it. But let's get back to the importance of the actions that I was taking, I suppose, in between these big gigs. And like I say, I'll be honest, actually, it was a little bit of a shock, I think, at first, that So I got on this gig of the Hours, and because I'd seen Charisse and how, you know, that became her be all and end all and all of this, I was like, great, I'm done. I'm on a big gig, therefore I will always be on a big gig. It was kind of that mentality, and you know, it was just incorrect because I just didn't have the experience, and that's fine. I kind of, like I say, I learned very quickly because we went and did a whole bunch of shows. We did a tour supporting the Twang, doing the UK university circuit, which was great fun. It was really, really good fun. But then after that, there was a void. There was a period of like, not a lot. And I was like, oh, this is a problem. I had just moved out of home. I was now living, I rented a room from this singer, Alex Hepburn. We were living together in southwest London, and I was like, I have rent to pay, like, and I have food that I need to eat, and no matter how much I kind of took down those expenses, the money that came in from working with the Hours was not enough to cover my expenses. So I was like, oh, okay, I need to adjust and adapt very quickly in this situation. So that's what I did, because that's who I am, and I think that's a very useful quality, should we say, to have when you're well, freelancing anything, to be honest. The ability to adapt is the thing that I think will give the most longevity in a creative industry like we're all in, or trying to be in, depending on where you're at on your journey. So here are some of the things that I sort of like was like, oh, all right, quick maneuver, pivot, let's go. So the first thing that I sort of like, because what I realised was, before I was doing the Hours, I was playing regularly in a covers band with a band called Key with George. Hey George, I love you. And Scratch, who again I adore. Like I give so much honour to that band, because it taught me so much, and it got me working, and it got me in the cover circuit and all of that. It was mainly like Australian, New Zealand cover circuit around London, which probably sounds very niche, and it was absolutely wonderful. But anyway, so I'd been doing that, but when I started doing the Hours, I was like, I can't really commit to playing with you guys full time anymore, which all credit to them, they were cool with, which was great. But what I realised was that was now going to be the case, because my priority became working with original artists that were going on tour. I wanted to be on the road. It was as simple as that. I wanted to be, my whole thing was, in 2008, I'd had a taste of touring, and I was like, oh, I like this. And we went, to the States a little bit. So it's like, oh, I really like that. So I was like, right, my goal in my head now, I want to be on a world tour. I want to tour the world. That's it. So that became priority number one, and everything else fell below that. So anything that was going to get in the way of that, I was like, I'm not going to do that. And one of those things was committing to a covers band, because I know committing to a band that did not work with that goal in mind, because I knew that I know what I'm like when I get into bands, when I work with artists. I have this inherent loyalty to them. It's who I am. It's how I'm built. And I know that I would sacrifice my own goals and well-being for someone else's band. And I just know that that's who I am. And it's a good thing, and it sometimes is not a good thing. It's fine, yin and yang. It's always going to have upsides and downsides. But knowing that about myself, I was like, okay, I can't get myself into that situation. However, I still need to earn a living. So I was like, how about I focus on like being more of a depth drummer? So I just come in, I do a gig, and I get out again. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me. That makes absolute sense. So that's what I started doing. What I would do is I would get in touch with all the bands that I sort of like were adjacent to. I'd start with the Australian, New Zealand covers circuit. I'd be like, look, if there's any one-offs that you have, I'd love to come and like dep or whatever. And then I sort of like, by doing that, obviously on the cover circuit, I don't know if you're the same if you're on the cover circuit, like there are a few bands and you sort of all know each other, and everyone sort of crisscrosses over like different people playing in different bands, So I just sort of let it be known, look, I can't commit to a band, but if your drummer can't do a gig, please give me a shout, because I need to work. And lucky for me, people did, and kindly kind of thought of me when they did need a dep. And I was friends with the other drummers in the bands anyway, so I let them know. I mean, it's much easier to just go direct to them, because at the end of the day, if it's a drummer calling me, I'm much more like, I don't know, I feel better about that. I'm like, yeah, no, this makes sense. Like, I'm just here to come in, do the job, get out. Like, you're happy because I've come and done a good job. I'm happy because I get to have the little bit of work, and I have fun anyway. I love meeting new people always. So it kind of works for me. That works for my psyche. And again, this is all very personal, because your brain will work differently to mine. Obviously, it's kind of obvious, whatever, but I'm just going to state it because, I don't know, sometimes I think we take things for granted as like, oh, that's obvious. And then someone will be like, not to me. I've had those moments where I'm like, didn't know that very basic fact about humans. Didn't know all humans were like that. So anyway, that's what I started doing. And don't get me wrong, that was not enough to kind of keep me afloat, as it were. So I would also still constantly be looking up online for people that needed drummers for one-off gigs. It's where I met the wonderful Alex Wesley, who, hey Alex, if you're listening, I love you to pieces too. He is he's a really great songwriter. Does a lot of cover stuff, guitarist, singer, and I went and did one gig with him, and we just got on really well. It was just an absolute laugh, and from there he would call me for one-off gigs, which I was like, this is perfect. So it's just like, if I'm around, I'm around. If I'm not, I'm not. Like, just keep asking me. And when it worked, it was beautiful. Like, it was like, hey, how you doing? Like, I haven't seen you for a while. And you know, because sometimes, I don't know whether you find this, but it can get a little stagnant sometimes when you're in a band that is going out every week or multiple times a week. And I love it, it's great, and it's nice to build that kind of camaraderie and that friendship and that family vibe with a band. But equally, there's something really nice about just dipping into people's lives for me and just going, hey, how you doing? What have you been up to? Like, what's going on? Catch me up, come in, play a gig, couple of hours, get out again, see you in a few months. And I like that. That really works for my personality. Some people are completely the opposite, and that's fine. But I think it's about just finding what really works for you, essentially. And yeah, anyway, so that was kind of like the first thing that I realized needed to happen for me. So and I'll give you a really nice, like, when I tell you, these things happen so often, and I love them when they happen. So I was playing with this artist called Emilia Matiku, who I actually don't think I mentioned on my last episode, which I am so embarrassed about, because she is a fantastic artist, jazz artist. Oh my God, I adore her. She's one of the sweetest, kindest people, and happens to have a fantastic voice. But anyway, we did a gig supporting Alfie Boe at the Royal Albert Hall. In fact, it was 2 nights, I think, at the Royal Albert Hall. And it was great. It was so wonderful. I love that venue anyway. I had played there, I think, once before at that point. And anyway, it was part of a tour supporting Alfie Boe, and yeah, we'd done some great shows, great venues, and I was like, this is just great. And then literally the next day, I was playing in a pub it was either Enfield or Barnet, and I can't remember. I want to say Barnet, and it was for a grunge covers night, and we were playing like 90s covers, grunge covers. And so to go from one night at the Royal Albert Hall to the next night in a pub in front of, like, I don't know, 50 people or whatever, like really sweaty, grotty, and I swear to you, I was like, I love this. I love the juxtaposition of the two, different styles of gig, but the different styles of venue. And when I tell you that I loved both of those gigs equally, like, I just love it. I love the randomness of life and how things work out like that. It makes it rich, you know what I mean? And also that gig in the gig in the Royal Albert Hall was very sort of like, you know, session musician, you know, very professional, blah, 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 blah. The gig in the pub was with, like, it felt, well, it was with friends, essentially. I mean, yes, it was in a professional capacity in that we were being paid, but they're all like Enfield boys, like they're the kind of dudes that I grew up with, you know what I mean? So it was just really, like, good for the soul. It was one of those ones. So so that's sort of I'd say the main crux of what I was up to in terms of earning money, for sure, aside from doing the named gigs, because again, you know, people see you on a named gig and they just assume that's all you're doing. Let me tell you, that is never all I'm doing, ever. That's what you're seeing, and that's awesome, and that's fine, but I am constantly I mean, it's a problem. No, it's not so much a problem now. It was a problem. I was running myself into the ground, but yeah, I was always doing other things. So that was the first thing, sort of the covers side of things, and like I say, specifically depping, because it gave me the flexibility to be able to take on originals gigs, like, you know, tours. Essentially, that's all that mattered to me. I was just like, I need the ability to take on a tour. How can I do that without letting people down? Because I hate letting people down. I hate it. And again, you will have your own makeup that will make you make your decisions. I think it's good to learn these things about yourself so that you're not battling with yourself about certain things, if that makes sense. So anyway, that was what I was doing in terms of earning somewhat of a consistent, predictable income, because people love covers bands, and that's an awesome thing. Also, I love playing covers, can I just say? I love it. I have a lot of fun with it. So the next thing that I was doing was, and again, by doing these covers band things, this afforded me the time to do this. I would go to jam nights. I'd go to at least one a week. And to be fair, I've been going to jam nights for, well, since I was 11. I was going to blues jams at 11. My mum and my dad, sorry, I don't know why I always say my dad. My parents used to take me and Sharice to these blues jams. I'll never forget the very first one we went to. It was, although I'm saying this, and then I'm like, wait, what was it called? I was going to say the Hot Poles, and I don't think it was the Hot Poles, but anyway, 11 years old, and we're getting up with like 60-year-old dudes, and anyway, we did that for years. Every week on a Thursday we would, or Tuesday depending on, because the jams changed over the years, we would go get up, play songs at these blues jams, every night. But that was something that continued. I mean, to be fair, sometimes still to this day I will occasionally go to blues jams. They still, can I just say, if you're thinking about going to a blues jam and you're like, that scares the bejesus out of me, it still scares the bejesus out of me. Still, like, I was talking to one of my students the other day about, he was like, yeah, I'm going to go to a jam night. And dude, he's so confident. And I'm like, I love that for you. I really do. But honestly, the thought of me going to that jam scares me. Like, I didn't say that. And apologies if you're listening right now, you know who you are. But I would be terrified. I'm so intimidated by those things. I really am. I force myself because I understand the benefit. And it's not, for me, it's not necessarily about the networking opportunities, which is a thing, obviously, is part of it. But for me, it's kind of the thing of, like, I do have a sadistic obsession with getting out of my comfort zone, and let me tell you, that is the quickest way to get me out of my comfort zone. Like, put me up on stage in a genre that I'm not that comfortable with, because, as I say, like, if I went to a blues jam right now, not a problem. Like, it's in my blood. I've grown up playing that. If you put me into a situation where it's kind of like rock covers, not a problem. Even if I don't know the song, I can wing it. Like, I don't have a problem with that. However, put me in any sort of jazz or like funk based jam, oh my god, you will see me fall apart. Maybe not on the outside, but on the inside I'm screaming. I feel like I'm drowning. It's a whole thing. But again, that's what I kind of was very focused on, was like, okay, I want to be going to jam nights. For me at that time, it was more about expanding my network of musicians, because I knew that the more people that I know, the more work that I'm going to get. It's a very simple equation. Obviously, if they see you play, you're more likely to get more work, because they literally either have seen you play, or even better, have played with you on that jam night. And hopefully you've done a good enough job. If you haven't, just go back the next week and try again. That's all that you need to do. Weirdly, like, I always remember having this experience, right? I don't think I've ever spoken about this, not at least on this podcast. So I went to this jam it was one that was very short-lived. It was in Balham at this place called, oh my goodness, I can't remember. Oh my goodness. Okay. If you're listening, you know exactly where I'm talking about. If you know this venue in Balham, it's right next to the station. It's very well known. You're sort of playing in the round, although this wasn't actually in the venue. It was in this weird upstairs bit that I didn't even know. I can't believe I can't remember the name of this venue. That is so embarrassing. I've played there so many times. Anyway, I went to the jam night and I didn't know the people there, but I knew of the people there. And I knew that these people were all kind of in the sort of like UK pop scene, like big pop artists. Like it was a good bunch of people. Obviously, that wasn't all people. There were a whole bunch of different people. And I was like, I'm just going to go. I'm going to get up. I'm going to play, rah, 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 rah. Anyway, I get up to play. Okay, there's one thing that happened. Basically, there was this dude. He was a house drummer, and he thought he was being very helpful, but he kind of was like. I sat down, and he said, "If you don't know the song or whatever, if you're struggling, just let me know, and I'll just take over." It was meant very sweetly, and I was like, "All right, thank you very much." And I was in my head, obviously, I was going, "I'll show you, rah, rah, rah." Bear in mind, I was probably in my early 20s at this point, so I ain't young. And I've been playing for a while, but they call this song. So it was a modern pop jam. And as someone who is mainly rock and blues oriented, it was not a risk, but I was like, this could be anything right now that's about to happen because I literally don't know. Anyway, they called a garage song and I was like, sorry. Now I used to listen to garage when I was like 14, 15, but have I ever played garage? Actually, to be fair, I did very briefly learn a few songs for Shiesty, if anyone knows that artist. Again, this will bring me on to my next thing that I was doing in between, and I'd completely forgotten about Shiesty, although I didn't actually play with her, I just auditioned for her, I suppose, and we sort of had a bit of back and forth. But anyway, they called this song, and I'm like, everything fell out of my brain. I was like, I literally don't know what to play. So anyway, I started playing with this singer, and honestly, it was just awful. It just wasn't right. You know what I mean? Like, you know when you can kind of wing stuff and make it sit? It wasn't sitting. It just wasn't quite right. It definitely was not authentic enough, like 100%. But anyway, I got through and I was embarrassed. But anyway, I got off the stage and I was like, that was awful. Like, I've just introduced myself on the drums to these people and done a shocking job, like shocking. But anyway, I kind of left with my tail between my legs, and then I proceeded to, meet these various people later on in life. Do you think they remembered me? Nah. And that's the joy of a jam night. If you rock up once, people aren't going to remember you. And sometimes that's a good thing. If you do a good job, they will remember you, because then you can go, if you're feeling good afterwards, go chat to people, blah, 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 blah. I did not. I was like, nah, I need to leave. I need to leave this place. And I did. And that, I think I stayed for the rest of the night, but I didn't make inroads to chat to people. I was like, I'm fine just in the corner, just witnessing what's happening so I can have a bit of a better idea of what to expect if I come back or when I come back. I don't know if I ever did, to be honest. I think I was quite scarred by it. But anyway, and then there were other jams that I went to, and I sort of found some great jam nights. There was one that, again, so let's talk about how bands kind of overlap, and this is the other thing, like, no musician is an island. Everyone's always doing stuff, and so the guitarist from The Hours, one of the guitarists I should say, was running a jam night in North London, which is really close to where I grew up, like really close to where I went to school, and so I used to go to that jam night, and let me tell you, that was the best jam night, not only because of the songs were always fantastic, but the level of people that would rock up was just stellar. And the thing is that not only was the level amazing, and also it's quite eclectic, actually, now that I think about it. Everyone was just so warm, and it wasn't about look at me, it was more like, let's have a laugh. It was very much that, let's just play music and have fun. And a byproduct of that is that you would just get chatting to people. And honestly, there's so, like, I can't tell you the amount of people that I met from that one jam night and going there, you know, every week. Well, like, when I wasn't on the road, I would head down. And sometimes I'd be the house drummer. And again, it's that thing of being like adept. So if I was around, Rich would ask me and I'd be like, yeah, I'm around. Like, let's. By the way, Richard Lobb, absolute legend. We love him. Toy Box Jam doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. But some of my fondest memories, some of my fondest people I've ever met and had the privilege of spending time with is from that jam. And again, it came because I was doing the hours, but it was an adjacent thing, if that makes sense. So that was another way that I was sort of like spending my time, if you like. And then sort of the third thing that I wanted to talk about was the other way in which I was spending my time, which... So there's the people that I mentioned on the last episode, the kind of named artists, if you like. But for every named artist that I was working with, I was probably simultaneously working with at least like 3 other artists that, for whatever reason, didn't quite do things, which I'm still gutted about for so many people, because there are so many fantastic artists that haven't quite broken yet. I'm going to say yet because some of them are still chipping away, and I truly believe that if you do just keep chipping away, things will happen. And I've seen it happen. Where I was playing with artists and then I've gone off to do other things and then they've broken through, and I'm like, come on, let me tell you as well, if I've ever worked with you, I am rooting for you, like, always, 100%. Like, oh, there's some fantastic artists around. So now, because I was sort of like doing these other named gigs, the way that I saw it was that it afforded me, as long as I'd sort of, as I said, paid my rent and had some food in my fridge, it afforded me the ability to work with artists that either had no budget at all, but I really loved the music, or they were really challenging my skill set or even expanding my network. And I've spoken about this in past episodes, I would use my time, because that's how I feel. I feel like my time and my energy are actually my currency, if that makes sense. And earning a living is just something to afford me more time, basically, and more rest, so that I can have more energy to do more things. I don't know whether that makes sense for you, but honestly, it's how I live my life, because I kind of have to. My energy reserves are a little bit all over the shop sometimes, and I have to be very mindful of that. It's taken me many years to realise that. But what I actually wanted to do was shout out some of the artists that I have worked with in the past who are absolutely fantastic. And I'm going to see if I can remember who I was working with at the same time that I was working with them, if that makes sense. So Purple Ferdinand is one of them. We love Purple Ferdinand. So she was an artist that I was working with in 2013. And I remember that only because during one of her rehearsals is when I got the phone call for Janet Devlin. And with Purple Ferdinand, as I recall, I think we did a few shows, and that was really good. I was using a lot of electronics for her stuff, and it was really good fun. It was also great MD, great band, actually, now that I think about it. Yeah, fantastic band, who I'm still in touch with, all of them, of course. Who was on bass? It was Michelle. Jeez, I haven't even thought about this for a very long time. Excuse me. So that was one, and again, it was just a few gigs. It was here and there. It could have taken off. It could have become something. It didn't, unfortunately, but that's fine. Another one was Philly. Oh my God, I love Philly. So Philly is this artist. It was just me and her on stage. And her music, she was, to me, quite ahead of her time. And every song of hers used to slow down and speed up, which initially sounded like my idea of hell as a drummer. And I was playing with her 2 tracks, so imagine that, like trying to get that right. Well, let me tell you, it was a hell of a challenge, but it was awesome. So so me and her did a whole bunch of gigs, and that would have been in 2008 or 2009, maybe end of 2008, beginning of 2009, because that's when I was playing with the hours, because I remember being in Rack Studios. In fact, it was 2008, because that was March, I think, 2008, or April 2008. No, June 2008. I don't know. We were in there for quite a while. I remember recording at RAG, and then in the downtime I was practicing her songs. I mean, very unprofessional, can I just say, like looking back, like, oh my god. But I didn't have access to a kit at the time. I was like, this is literally the only time I'm going to be able to do this, and I need to get it done. So anyway, that was Philly, and again, nothing quite broke with her, but oh my god, like so much potential. She was fantastic. We did a couple of music videos, we did gigs around London, and then obviously rehearsals and all that, so that filled up a fair amount of my time. I love Philly, I love her so much. And then this was actually back in the day. So this was an artist called Twee, who was a pop artist. I found an audition for her in, I want to say it was in Loot, which was a newspaper back in it was in the 90s, but it was still going in the early 2000s. And I probably went to audition for Twee when I was maybe 16, I think I was still playing in my metal band at the time. But we used to rehearse once a week at the weekends in Denmark Street, and in this band it was Twee, who was lovely. I don't actually remember any of her songs, which is sad, but we did a couple of gigs. We did maybe 3 gigs, maybe more, I don't know, maybe 4. It's such a long time ago. But in this band was it was Alex Bonfanti on bass, whose brother is Mark Bonfanti, who is a fantastic artist in his own right. And then on guitar, one of my favourite people from Muswell Hill. My parents used to drop him home. Michael Kiwanuka. Mike. I love Mike so much. And we used to have just the best time. He was just such a fantastic guitarist, and at the time he wasn't even singing. I remember so distinctly he was desperately trying to find a singer for his original stuff, because he was like, I can't sing and I don't want to sing, and then now he's like a singer artist. I love him so much. He's so funny. Like, that whole thing is so funny to me. But shout out to him. He is the dude that introduced me to D'Angelo's Voodoo album. So I have a piece of my heart will always be with Mike. He's just, I love him. I adore him. Again, always rooting for Michael. Always. So again, these things that Twee, I was not being paid. That was completely not a thing. But because I was doing covers gigs, and actually at that time I was still in school, so it was a bit different. It afforded me the chance to go and do things for free, just to see if something came of it. And, at the time, in fact, I was 17. I was definitely 17. So, yeah, me and Mike were just 2 17-year-old kids. I think Alex was a little bit older, maybe 19. We were just kids coming up, playing music, loving it. That was it. There was nothing more than that. Things then move on, and, people end up doing things and whatever else. But that initial seed was planted because I include Twee in this, obviously. The 4 of us were just hanging in a room, playing a couple of gigs, and that was it, and we dispersed, but we all kept in touch. In fairness, I haven't spoken to Alex for a long time. I'd love to see how he is, actually. So that was Twee. Then another artist called, or act I should say, called Peter and Kerry, who I love, and I hope that they're still doing stuff. I love you guys. I actually love your music. So that was happening that started in 2010. And the reason that I know that is because they asked me to do a bunch of shows and I couldn't do them because I was going out with Tricky, as in going on the road with Tricky. Whenever I say that, I think people could easily misconstrue that I was dating the artist that I'm saying about. But when I say going out, I mean going on tour with. So I remember that distinctly, and I remember because I had to let them down on a gig that I'd already said yes to, and the turmoil that I had of oh my god, this is killing me. And I was like, guys, I'm so sorry, but I can't do that gig because I'm going on a European and South American tour. And they bless them, they were like, that's amazing, yeah, go do the thing. And I was like, do you know what, I love you guys, you are fantastic. So again, this was a gig that I was doing I was being paid for it. It was a very small amount, but again, I was afforded that because I was doing all this other work, and it was more about just getting out there, meeting more people. That's when I met Leanne Havas. That was a gig in East London at the Slaughtered Lamb, and we met each other in the bathroom, and I was like, neither of us had played yet, but we knew that we were both playing that night, and I was like, oh, hey, how you doing? You're right. And this was before, like, she was right on the edge of, like, signing a deal, I think. And she was like, yeah, it's like a really last minute gig for me. They literally called me this afternoon because the support act pulled out, whatever. I was like, oh, amazing. Like, yeah, I really look forward to seeing you play and whatever. Let me tell you, I don't think I've ever been so floored by someone when I saw them sing and play. And I was like, and afterwards, Leanne, you didn't tell me that. You didn't tell me this. Fantastic, so fantastic. That was also one of the days that I have regret that day that I didn't say to her. By the way, I was talking to a student about this the other day. I don't have many regrets in my life, but one of the regrets I do have is that day not saying to Leanne, by the way, if you ever need a drummer, call me. I want to play with you. I wish I had said that on that day, but I did not. We stayed in touch. We have stayed in touch. Again, I haven't seen her for so long, and I adore her so much. And Peter and Kerry, that whole crew, that whole East London and sort of South East London crew are so lovely. And then who else? There was Manjari, who I have spoken about before, who is essentially, again, this was one showcase gig that we did and probably 2 rehearsals, which essentially led me to working with Brian Ferry. There's, speaking of which, Ollie Forrest, again, an artist that you may not have heard of yet, you might have done, and he is the guitarist for Brian Ferry. So we just started jamming, doing his solo stuff, and again, not being paid or anything, just getting in a room and playing, and again with some other fantastic musicians. In fact, another artist called Swayze, who I adore. I adore her. I love her. But again, like, you know, these people are all still working, doing their own thing, have their own kind of like networks. There's another dude, Nikolai Prouse, who I did actually quite a few shows with, who used to be in a band called Do Me Bad Things, who I love. And then Nikolai's stuff is so good. Like, he's such a fantastic songwriter and singer. Like, I adore that man. But yeah, this is what I mean. Like, these are all artists that you may or may not have heard of in some respect. But I was doing all this stuff alongside still going out with these bigger artists, as it were. And then you've got like the mid-level guys as well, people like Joe Burt, who is an artist in his own right, who, again, I've been playing with him since, we worked it out, I saw him the other day, I think it's since 2000, I met him in 2008 for sure, but I think I started playing with him in 2010 maybe, and oh my god, that guy, his music is fantastic. And again, I don't get paid necessarily, well, sometimes for playing with him, but it's just playing with him is so good. But the people that are involved with his stuff are such high level players, like fantastic. The songs are fantastic. I adore him. I know that I say this about like most of the artists that I work with, but honestly, I've been so lucky with the people that I work with. Like, they are just gems of human beings, and I think that's it. It's more about that for me, and then anything that comes from that is kind of a happy byproduct. But to a degree, it is sort of like a numbers game, and just the way that I see it is that the more people that you play with, the more chance that you've got of either someone else sort of like breaking through and you can get on that ride with them, and that's great when that happens, or the adjacent people, like the other musicians that are also playing for that artist, are no doubt doing the same thing that you are. So by extension, you're kind of like expanding your network a little bit. It's like, yeah, it just makes sense. I remember I depped for this is sort of within the covers circuit, but I depped for one, in fact, how did that happen? I depped doing one 80s gig. We did a rehearsal, and in the rehearsal was a bass player called Phil Mann. Hey Phil, haven't seen you for ages, I hope you're well. Anyway, me and Phil got on really well, and he's like, do you want to come and do this random covers gig? And I was like, yeah. So I went and did that, which actually was the reason that I did that like in the long run, the reason I did that grunge thing I told you about, where it was a Royal Albert Hall one night, grunge gig the next night, that was an extension of that after a little time. But on that one gig I did with Phil Mann, the covers gig, I then met Dean Sharp, who also runs an amazing hot sauce company. I can't remember the name of it. Dean of the Dead Hot Sauces. Sorry, Dean, if I've got that wrong, I'm so sorry. But he was playing with Lois Winston, who is Ray Winston's daughter. So I ended up did I do gigs with her? We definitely did a whole bunch of rehearsals. I feel like maybe we did one gig, I think. That's what I mean, my memory. But again, it's like these very tenuous, random little links. And sometimes you go down that road and it leads to something. But sometimes it doesn't, at least just for now. Like, for all I know, I don't know, Lois Winston could call tomorrow. I don't know. Or she could blow. I don't know. The point is, I don't know. But I do know that I have sown a lot of, oh, that sounds awful. I was going to say sown a lot of seeds, and that sounds terrible. But what I'm saying is I have played with a lot of people, and sometimes it's with people that you've heard of, but the majority is covers. It's artists who have not quite broken yet. It's with other musicians who are also just trying to make a living, as we all are. And there's no trodden path. There's not. I think you just have to do the best you can, give yourself the most opportunities you can, put yourself in awkward positions, but, be purposeful with the kind of opportunities you might be exposing yourself to. And often that means putting yourself in lots of different situations until one of them hopefully pays off. Maybe, hopefully. And if it doesn't, you just keep going. And it's not about one and done. It doesn't happen like that. It absolutely doesn't. And I kind of spoke about that in the last episode. But the things that you see on the outside, and whether that's social media or whatever else, if you say to me, oh, who are you playing with at the moment, I will probably say the artists that you've heard of most. And it's like when I meet people for the first time, they find out that I'm a drummer, they say, oh, who have you played for? And I say, oh, what music are you into? That's my first question to you, because that will determine who I tell you, so that you can hopefully recognise who I play with. And yeah, that's probably an insecure thing from my part, but what it means is it's a point of reference. But for that one artist that I tell you, there's all these, I'd say I've definitely played with, probably hundreds of different outfits for sure. But yeah, I hope that kind of gives you some sort of insight. I don't think there's any point that I'm making to this, other than that there is so much more going on beneath the surface, aside from someone being seen to be playing with one named artist. There's a whole foundation of hundreds of other musicians, artists, situations that they've been in, to then either get to that point or support that point or go alongside that point of the one artist that you've heard of. That's my point. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. It's a little rambly, I know, but that is how it is. I'm not going to try and put this out in an XYZ equals whatever. It's not how it goes. It's a mess. It's a cacophony. Who knows? It is about just getting out there, doing the thing, being uncomfortable, putting yourself in positions, and just keep going, basically. So yeah, anyway. I'm going to love you and leave you on that note. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do feel free to like, share and subscribe with any of your musician friends. If you would like to support this podcast, you now can over on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/EmilyDrums. And if you would like to see any other little mini bits of content that I put out about being a professional musician, then you can go follow me over on Instagram. Apologies for the leaf blower. If you can hear that, I don't know, I might be able to get it out in post. But yeah, if you go to instagram.com/EmilyDrums. No, not Emily Drums. Hey Emily Drums. Instagram.com/HeyEmilyDrums or at HeyEmilyDrums. Also, I'm going to do this occasionally because it makes me feel uncomfortable and therefore I should do it. I spoke to a student about this yesterday, and that is about being very direct. If you want to have one-on-one coaching sessions with me, and what that means is having a call once a month, and then in between having chats over WhatsApp or whatever, just keeping you accountable to the things that you should be doing to forward your career, because it's very easy knowing the things, but sometimes executing them, sometimes difficult. So if you want me to be your personal accountability buddy, who will check in with you every week, then and whatever else, if you have any questions or whatever in between that you're like, I don't know what I should be doing, I can be there to be like, right, have you thought about this? Then you can do that. If you reach out to me on Instagram is probably the best thing, or you can send me an email at emily@emilydrums.com. But anyway, I shall leave it there. I hope you're having a nice day wherever you are, whatever you're up to, and I shall see you next week for another subject. All right, thank you again, Louis, for your question. I really appreciate it. Mwah! All right, see you later. Bye.